Hello, welcome back to my Christmas spooky room. I'm really annoyed by these lights, but anyway, so we're on to episode 8, and it was 12 days ago that it was posted, so I'm starting to get concerned that this might be the last one. Although, I do think we're coming to some sort of a conclusion. I cannot express enough that Potato Chip 411 is actually called Brianna, and she is amazing writing this stuff. I am absolutely loving her work, and I'm hoping beyond all hope, that there's more stories to come because if this is anything to go by, I am very excited. So we ended episode 7 with the world around me disappeared. I saw things, horrors I couldn't comprehend, flashes of fire, screaming and darkness, creatures crawling their way into this world, and her, Marina, or whatever she truly was, emerging from the chaos beneath the floor of this house. So we're left with the cliffhanger of we've just found out that Marina has just woken up from her trance. She's obviously been brainwashed into not realizing that she is actually a demon as well. So I'm intrigued to see how she ended up married to Greg when Greg is there to protect this house. So let's get stuck in to episode 8 and see where this takes us to. The blaring buzz of my phone jolted me awake in the dead of night. I sat up in bed, confused and half asleep, reaching for my phone on my nightstand. The security system had gone off. Something or someone was on that property. So we're with Greg. Groggily, I swiped the screen to pull up the feed. At first I thought it was static messing with the camera, but then I saw it. A figure stood on the lawn of that house, the cage. I scrambled for my gun and threw on a jacket. My hands were trembling as I stepped outside into the freezing night air, moving towards the figure with slow, deliberate steps. When I got close enough to see its face, I froze. She wasn't human. Her crimson skin glistened under the pale moonlight, and her eyes glowed faintly, casting shadows over her sharp, almost ethereal features. Wings hung from her back, torn and twisted like she crawled straight out of some nightmare. There was something hauntingly vulnerable about the way she stood, her head tilted slightly, her glowing eyes following my every movement. Her lips parted and a guttural sound escaped. Words maybe, but not in any language I'd ever heard. My finger hovered over the trigger. What are you doing here? I demanded, but my voice wavered. She didn't answer, just continued to watch me unblinking. And then, against every ounce of instinct screaming at me to shoot, I felt drawn to her. You're beautiful, I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Her head tilted further, almost like she was trying to understand me. My grip on the gun slackened. I took a shaky step forward. You must be cold, I muttered, shrugging off my jacket and draping it over her shoulders. She didn't flinch, she didn't recoil, just kept staring at me. Her gaze somehow predatory and childlike. I'll help you, I said, though I wasn't sure how or why. She spoke again in that strange guttural language, her voice softer now, almost pleading. I swallowed hard and did something I never thought I'd do. I lifted her into my arms. Her body was impossibly light, her skin hot to the touch. She didn't struggle. She didn't fight me, just let herself be carried like she'd been waiting for someone to do this. I brought her inside. The air inside my home suddenly felt far too thin. I placed her on the couch. She sat perfectly still, her wings curling slightly around her as if shielding herself. I stood across from her, trying to gather my thoughts. What am I doing? I muttered aloud, pacing the floor. I should call someone. Someone from the big place who knows about this kind of thing. Someone who can... A soft sound from her stopped me. I turned to see her staring at the television, her glowing eyes flickering in its pale light. I fumbled for the remote and turned it on, flipping through channels until I landed on a Christmas movie. Here, I said awkwardly. I don't know, maybe this will help. She didn't react at first, but then began watching intently, her head tilting slightly at the images. I sat across from her, still clutching my gun, and watched as her lips began to move, shaping the sounds she had heard on the screen. It was unsettling, like watching a child learn to speak, but far too quickly. Her voice was rough and garbled, mimicked the words poorly at first, but gradually improving. I needed to help her, but how? My mind raced, and then an idea formed. A terrible, desperate idea. I grabbed my keys and headed out, leaving her in the glow of the television. I drove to the edge of town to a store I knew stayed open late. My hands trembled as I scoped out the parking lot, spotting a lone woman walking to the car. An hour later, I returned, dragging the woman into the house. She was screaming, her terror filling the room as she thrashed against the ropes I used to tie her to a chair. The demon on the couch turned towards us, her glowing eyes narrowing as she stared at the woman. Slowly she rose to her feet, her movements fluid and predatory. "Please," the woman sobbed, her voice cracking. I stood back, clutching the rope, with shaking hands, watching as the demon stepped closer. She reached out, touching the woman's face, and something horrifying began to happen. The demon's features started to change, her crimson skin fading into a pale human hue. Her wings shrank and disappeared, her claws retracting into soft hands. The woman in the chair screamed as her skin turned grey and cracked, her life draining away as the demon took on her form. When it was over, the young woman's body slumped forward lifeless. The demon stood before me now fully human, her transformation complete. She turned to me with a blank expression, and for a moment I thought I saw gratitude in her eyes, but it was fleeting, replaced by something colder, something that made me wonder if I just unleashed something far worse than I could ever imagine. "Do you know how to talk now?" I asked cautiously. "Do you know how to talk now?" she repeated, her voice rough and fragmented, like a broken record attempting to mimic my words. "Ah, I see," I said, nodding with understanding. "It must take some time. Don't worry, I'll take care of everything." "My name is Greg," I stammered, trying to pronounce every syllable slowly so that she could understand it. "Nomen est Greg," she replied, her voice smooth and unnervingly confident. "My name is Greg," I repeated this time with more conviction, jabbing a finger at my chest. Her glowing eyes fixed on me and she pointed back. "You are Greg," she said, her smile curling into a sinister grin. I hesitated, then reached into the purse of the lifeless stranger before me. Pulling out an ID card, I scanned it briefly before handing it to the figure before me, unable to tear my gaze away. "You are Marina," I said, my voice trembling as I pointed at her. She tilted her head, studying me with an intense, almost curious expression. Her glowing eyes flickered and a faint smile tugged at her lips, a smile that sent a strange thrill through me. Not fear, but something deeper. "Handle all of this," she repeated slowly, her voice uneven, yet oddly melodic, testing the words on her tongue. I chuckled softly, feeling a warmth spread through me, despite the unnatural air around her. "Yes, exactly. I'll take care of everything. You don't need to worry." She stepped closer, her movements graceful and otherworldly. Her presence was intoxicating, drawing me in further. "Fine," she murmured, her tone soft, almost teasing. My heart quickened as I watched her. Everything about her, her voice, her form, the way she looked at me, was all hypnotic. I felt as though I was standing on the edge of something immense and beautiful, and I didn't care if I fell. I reached out and took her hand, guiding her gently to sit down. Her skin was warm but not hot to touch like before. I held on to her as though it was the most natural thing in the world. I looked into her now human eyes, feeling a strange mix of emotions I couldn't explain. Before I could stop myself, the words began spilling out of me. Lies, every one of them, but in that moment they felt as real to me as the air I breathed. "Marina, honey," I began, my voice soft, steady and laced with something akin to affection. "We're married. This is our home. You've been really sick and it's made it hard for you to remember some things." Well, her gaze didn't waver, her expression unreadable, but I pressed on undeterred. It's okay though, don't worry, I said with a reassuring smile, squeezing her hand. We'll figure it all out together. We'll learn everything all over again. Even as I spoke, I felt the weight of the lie settle into my chest, but looking at her, it swiftly went away. It was Monday morning, and I woke up to Marina standing as still as the night, staring out of our bedroom window. If I had to guess, she was staring right at that house. I slowly walked up to her, looking over her shoulder at the view of the house. As two kids run across the front yard playing and laughing. I need that, she says in a favour, matter-of-fact and robotic tone of voice. Children? I asked, confused. I need children. I've never wanted children, but hearing her say that she needed children made me feel that I needed children too, with her. I chuckled. One thing at a time, Marina. Let's get ready for the day. We have to go to the courthouse to get our marriage certificate. Remember that big important building I told you about? She turned toward me and sat down with mechanical precision, her movements stiff and unnatural, as if her joints refused to cooperate. We go today? She asked, her voice halting, but her eyes bright with curiosity, glowing with something almost childlike, hope maybe. I cupped her face gently and pressed a swift kiss on her cheek. Yes, we go today. I led her to the bathroom, guiding her through each step of the morning ritual. I helped her wash, laid out her clothes, and dressed her with care. I styled her hair, applied her makeup, and rehearsed the little details with her over and over. I wasn't just helping her get ready, I was helping her become. I'd studied every detail of the original Marina's life, learning her story so I could etch it into my wife's mind, piece by piece, until it felt like her own. Marina had been a teacher at a small school outside of town. She was from Idaho, an only child who had grown up in foster care. It was a history with clean edges, no loose threads, no one left to answer questions. The fit was so perfect it felt like fate, as if this life had been designed just for her. We got the news. Marina was pregnant. The realisation hit me like a tidal wave. This changed everything. I knew I had no choice but to involve the big place. With shaky hands, I reached for my phone to make the call, but before I could dial, it rang. It was him. I answered, my heart pounding. Before you say anything, I know what I did could cost me my job, but Greg, he interrupted, his voice brimming with something between admiration and awe. You are phenomenal. How did you get her to fully transform? Even the ones we caught before, they were never this human. But her, she's perfect. She can bear children, Greg. She's achieved something like a soul, even if it's mimicked. You can't take her from me, I said, cutting him off sharply. Greg, why would we? We can monitor and experiment from afar. You're the scientist in this parable, after all. She is my wife, not some experiment, I growled, my voice shaking. Oh, Greg, he replied, his tone calm and calculating. We'll be in touch. For now, just bring her to the big place for her medical checkups and, of course, for the delivery. 6 months later, our children were coming, and they were coming into the world strong, too strong. They tormented Marina. Their insatiable hunger, their relentless movements, their claws tearing at the inside of her womb, poking through the fragile skin of her belly. It was a nightmare. Her pregnancy was a war zone, every moment more horrific than the last. I loathed them. How dare they drain the life from her? How dare they hurt her, puncture her, leave her fragile and worn? The worst part was Marina's unwavering love for them. She refused to acknowledge the pain. It doesn't hurt, she'd whisper with a serene smile, her voice soft and full of adoration. It's a welcome feeling. It feels familiar, like home. Her words chilled me. Familiar to home? I held Marina's hand tightly as we walked into the big house. This is the hospital, I told her, my voice calm. Even though my insides churned, she nodded, her trust in me unwavering, though I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes as she glanced at the sterile, featureless halls. The birth was... I don't even know how to describe it. It was heinous. It was horrifying. The officials were useless, fumbling and panic, completely out of their depth. No one had ever seen anything like this before. Marina screamed in agony as our children clawed their way into the world one by one. They were only 6 months along, but they didn't look it. They were enormous, their limbs powerful, their eyes already searching the room with a haunting intelligence. Then they started speaking. Not crying, speaking. At first it was broken, garbled sounds like nothing I'd ever heard before. But some of it was English, words and phrases fragmented, raw, mixed, and a language I couldn't even begin to comprehend. And their bodies. Oh, half of them was human, perfect and soft, but the other half, The other half was a nightmare. Charred red skin, leathery wings stretching awkwardly, their edges sharp like knives. The officials were thrilled. They pulled me aside after the chaos had settled and Marina was wheeled away. Take her home, one of them said, a smirk tugging at his lips. We'll need to work on them, just as you did with her. Fully transform them into humans. You know the process. When I told Marina, she didn't react at first. She stared at the wall silent, her expression blank, then something inside her broke. When we got home, she refused to leave the bed, slipping into a deep depression that consumed her. She barely spoke to me, barely ate, and at night she started slipping out of the house. Caught her one evening, barefoot and trembling on the way to that house. Stopped her before she got too far, and she didn't try and run again after that, but something inside her had changed. She became obsessed. Conspiracies, government theories, her every waking moment was spent glued to the screen, piecing together connections that made no sense. That house, she would mutter over and over, pointing to the strange building at the end of her street. It's not right. None of this is right. People that move next door go missing, or they leave shortly after they buy it. It's not right. I know it's that house. Her paranoia grew worse and spiralling until even the neighbours started calling her crazy. She had a complete breakdown one afternoon, screaming about things no one else could see, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't take it anymore. Told her I was taking her to a mental hospital, but really I took her to the big place. They promised to help. When she finally came home, she was different, quieter, calmer, and the children were there waiting for her in the driveway, their appearance perfectly human. When she saw them, she threw herself into their arms, tears of joy streaming down her face. I stood in the doorway watching her when I noticed something across the street. A man unloading boxes from a truck. A new neighbour. Called out to him and Marina and I walked over. He introduced himself. Jack. We shook hands and before he could say much, I invited him to a barbecue at our place. Wow. Oh my word. Oh my word. I don't know if this is the end, but if this is the end of the story, that was amazing. I love that it feels like it was all neatly wrapped up now. We've come full circle. Brianna, hats off to you. That was immaculate. Loved it. Loved every episode of this. Seriously, if you're not writing anymore, you need to get yourself writing because that was so good. I could see you putting together some sort of a book of short stories because this was so well written. Love, love, love that he helped her become human. He was drawn to her and it was all much quicker. It was made to look as if it had been going on for years and it hadn't. Wow. I wonder, will there be any more? Is that it? I feel satisfied by the story at this stage, but I want more. I'm just oh wow. Anyway guys, thank you so much for sitting with me to read this. I just realised that I had made myself a nice maple hazelnut latte. It was pretty cold. Anyway, yeah, I think I have some Christmas ones to read while I still have my Christmas decorations up in this room. So I will probably do that and upload them for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. But seriously, Brianna, I said again, if you're watching this, please write more because this is so good. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. See you soon.